When American soldiers first arrived in large numbers on European battlefields during World War II, many German troops were unsure what to expect. Early propaganda from Nazi leadership portrayed Americans as soft, inexperienced, and overly dependent on technology. German newspapers and military briefings often described the United States as a nation of factory workers, rather than hardened warriors. However, once U.S. forces landed in North Africa and later in Italy and France, first-hand encounters quickly reshaped these assumptions. German soldiers began noticing the scale of American manpower, the quality of their equipment, and their confidence under fire. While some initially dismissed them as inexperienced compared to British or Soviet troops, others observed their adaptability and resilience. The first clashes revealed that American units might lack experience early on, but they learned rapidly. Letters and diaries from German soldiers increasingly reflected a shift in tone, from mockery to cautious respect. What began as underestimation gradually evolved into recognition that the United States had entered the war with overwhelming industrial power and a determination that would be difficult to counter. For many German officers, the realization that they were facing not just an army, but an entire industrial superpower, marked a turning point in how they viewed their American opponents. One of the most common observations among German troops was the sheer abundance of American equipment. When U.S. forces deployed tanks like the M4 Sherman and aircraft such as the P-51 Mustang, German soldiers were struck by the volume, rather than just the quality. Though some German tank crews believed their Tiger I or Panther tank were technically superior, they could not ignore the endless streams of American replacements. Destroy one Sherman, and another seemed to appear the next day. This relentless production capacity deeply affected German morale. Soldiers wrote about American supply lines, as if they were unstoppable rivers of fuel, ammunition, and food. Even captured American positions were often stocked with fresh rations and equipment. Compared to the shortages plaguing German forces by 1944, the contrast was stark. Many Germans began to understand that they were fighting not just soldiers but factories thousands of miles away operating at full capacity. This industrial advantage shaped German perceptions profoundly. While they might have criticized certain tactical approaches of American units, they acknowledged that the United States could sustain losses and continue advancing in a way Germany simply could not match. German officers initially believed American troops lacked the rigorous battlefield experience of the Wehrmacht. Early encounters in North Africa reinforced some of these views, particularly during battles against the experienced Afrika Korps under Erwin Rommel. American units made tactical errors, and German commanders noted inconsistencies in coordination. However, by the time of the Italian campaign and especially after the D-Day landings, these views began to evolve. American forces adapted quickly to European warfare conditions. German reports increasingly acknowledged that U.S. soldiers were flexible and capable of learning from mistakes. Unlike rigid German doctrine late in the war, American commanders often encouraged initiative among junior officers. This adaptability impressed many German observers. Diaries described American artillery coordination as particularly effective, with rapid response times and overwhelming firepower. Though German veterans still considered themselves tactically superior in some situations, they no longer dismissed American troops as amateurs. The transformation from green recruits to seasoned combat units within a short period stood out as a defining trait of the U.S. Army. The landings on June 6, 1944, known as Normandy landings, profoundly changed German perceptions. At beaches like Omaha Beach, German defenders witnessed American determination under horrific conditions. Despite heavy casualties, U.S. forces continued pushing inland. German soldiers later described their surprise at how quickly the Americans regrouped after initial chaos. What German commanders had hoped would be a decisive repulsion turned into a massive foothold in France. The courage displayed during these landings contradicted earlier propaganda stereotypes. Many German veterans admitted after the war that they underestimated the psychological resilience of American troops. D-Day became a symbol not just of Allied coordination, but of American persistence. From that moment forward, few German soldiers doubted that the Western Front would remain a relentless pressure point until Germany collapsed. German accounts frequently mentioned the overwhelming firepower of American units. U.S. reliance on artillery and air support became a defining characteristic of their battlefield style. Before major offensives, German lines were often subjected to massive bombardment from Allied aircraft and artillery batteries. Soldiers described the sky as constantly filled with American planes. This dominance eroded morale significantly. German infantrymen often felt exposed and vulnerable during daylight hours. While some criticized Americans for avoiding close combat when possible, others recognized that this method minimized U.S. casualties and maximized effectiveness. To many Germans, American warfare seemed methodical, calculated, and resource-heavy, less about daring maneuvers and more about systematic destruction of enemy positions. It was a style difficult to counter once Germany lost air superiority. German troops were often astonished by the quality of American rations and supplies. Captured U.S. camps revealed chocolate, cigarettes, canned goods, and even Coca-Cola. Compared to dwindling German provisions, American soldiers appeared exceptionally well supported. This abundance sometimes led to stereotypes that Americans were luxury soldiers, yet envy was evident in many diary entries. German troops struggling with shortages could not ignore the stark contrast. The perception grew that the United States was fighting a rich man's war. Supported by a vast economy untouched by bombing until late in the conflict. Despite jokes about American softness, German soldiers repeatedly noted strong morale among U.S. troops. Americans rotated units, provided mail service, and ensured rest periods when possible. This maintained psychological stability compared to exhausted German formations fighting without relief. The belief that Americans were fighting far from home, yet remained motivated, impressed many German observers. By late 1944, morale differences were clear, especially during the Battle of the Bulge. During the Battle of the Bulge, German forces launched a desperate counteroffensive. Initially, surprise worked in Germany's favor. However, American resistance stiffened rapidly. German accounts described stubborn defensive stands, particularly around Bastogne. Even surrounded units refused to surrender. The response nuts, attributed to U.S. commanders, became symbolic of defiance. German officers realized that American determination remained strong despite heavy pressure. American air superiority, especially through strategic bombing and fighter escorts, shaped German opinions dramatically. Aircraft like the B-17 Flying Fortress conducted devastating raids on German cities and industry. German civilians and soldiers alike recognized the destructive capability of American air fleets. Many German soldiers expressed frustration at their inability to counter this dominance. German troops noticed cultural contrasts. Americans were often seen as informal, relaxed, and less rigid in discipline. While some Germans viewed this as weakness, others saw it as confidence. American soldiers' camaraderie and humor stood out even in combat zones. Accounts from German POWs often described fair treatment in American captivity. Compared to the brutality on the Eastern Front, many Germans considered capture by U.S. forces preferable. This reputation influenced battlefield behavior, with some units surrendering to Americans when possible. By 1945, most German soldiers understood that defeat was inevitable. American advances across the Rhine demonstrated organizational efficiency and overwhelming strength. German diaries from this period often contained resignation rather than hatred. After the war, former German officers openly acknowledged American strength. In interviews and memoirs, many admitted that they had underestimated U.S. industrial and logistical capabilities. Nazi propaganda created a false image of American incompetence. Real battlefield encounters shattered this illusion. German soldiers came to view Americans as resourceful, determined, and powerful opponents. In the end, German perspectives evolved from ridicule to respect. While they may have criticized certain tactics, they ultimately recognized that American soldiers represented a combination of morale, industry, and firepower that Germany could not overcome. The war in Europe demonstrated that the United States was not merely an economic giant, but a formidable military force, capable of decisive victory.